She was tied to the railroad with a sign. Until a cowboy stopped the train with his bare hands, the desert stretched wide under the early morning sky, painted with soft gold and pale blue light. The land looked empty at first glance, but the air carried stories, old trails, forgotten battles, and secrets buried beneath dust and stone. A long railroad cut across the plains like a silver scar, leading toward distant mountains that shimmered under the rising sun. Far away, a train rushed forward, its heavy wheels roaring against the rails. Steam rose into the cold morning air as the engine pushed forward without slowing. Inside the train, workers moved through narrow corridors, unaware of what waited ahead. Not far from the tracks, a lone cowboy rode quietly across a ridge. His horse moved with steady confidence, hooves tapping softly against the rocky ground. He wore a worn hat that shaded his face and a long coat that moved with the wind. People in nearby towns rarely saw him, and when they did, they spoke about him in whispers. Some said he came from nowhere. Others said he survived something that should have killed him. The cowboy himself avoided talking about the past. He preferred silence and distance. The desert felt safer than people. As he rode, he suddenly slowed his horse. A strange vibration moved through the ground beneath him. At first it felt like distant thunder, but then he realized it was the railroad. The train was coming fast. Normally, he would ignore it and continue his journey, but something felt wrong today. The air carried tension like a storm waiting to break. His eyes narrowed as he turned toward the tracks. In the distance, something unusual caught his attention. At first, it looked like debris or a fallen branch lying across the rails. But as he focused, he realized it was a person. His heart tightened. Without thinking, he pushed his horse forward into a fast run. Dust rose behind him as the train whistle screamed across the open land. The sound echoed loudly, warning anything nearby to move away. But the figure on the tracks did not move. The cowboy rode closer and saw clearly now, a young woman tied tightly to the railroad with thick rope. Her hands were bound behind her back, and her ankles were secured to the metal rails. Around her neck hung a wooden sign with dark letters written across it. He could not read the words from this distance, but he could feel the cruelty behind them. The train was getting closer. The woman's eyes were open, staring toward the sky. She looked tired rather than afraid, as if she had already accepted what was coming. Dust covered her clothes, and her hair moved gently in the wind. The cowboy felt anger rise inside him, not wild anger, but a deep, quiet kind that came when something was deeply wrong. He pushed his horse harder. The train whistle grew louder. Time was running out. When he reached the tracks, he jumped down quickly and ran toward her. The ground shook under the power of the approaching engine. He pulled at the ropes, but they were tied too tightly. Even with a knife, it would take too long. He looked up. The train was almost there. For a moment, he hesitated. He knew what he was capable of, but he also knew the danger of revealing it. For years, he had hidden his strange strength, afraid of how people would react. But leaving her, there was not a choice. He stepped onto the tracks and turned toward the oncoming train. The massive engine rushed toward him, metal roaring, steam rising into the sky. Anyone else would have run away. Instead, he planted his boots firmly on the rails. He raised his hands slowly. The air around him changed. A faint shimmer appeared, almost invisible under the sunlight. He felt the familiar pressure building inside him, a power he rarely allowed himself to use. As the train came closer, the ground shook violently. The cowboy pushed forward with all his strength. The impossible happened. The train began to slow. Metal screamed as brakes struggled against unstoppable momentum. Sparks flew from the wheels as the engine fought against an unseen force. Dust exploded around him, covering everything in a thick cloud. The driver inside the train pulled the emergency lever, shocked by what he saw, a lone man standing in front of the engine, holding it back with nothing but his bare hands. Finally, the train stopped. Silence fell across the desert. The cowboy lowered his hands slowly, breathing heavily. His arms trembled slightly from the effort, but he did not show weakness. Hal Kibad wo Sidha woman kai teref jaya, he quickly cut the ropes and helped her sit up. She looked at him with wide eyes, clearly trying to understand what she had just witnessed. "Why?" she asked softly. Her voice was weak but steady. He paused before answering. "Because leaving you here was wrong," he said simply. She watched him carefully, noticing the calm way he spoke and the way he avoided meeting her eyes for too long. There was kindness in him, but also something heavy. as if he carried memories he did not want to share. Before she could say more, dust clouds appeared on the horizon. Riders. The cowboy's expression changed instantly. "They coming back," she whispered. He helped her stand, supporting her when she struggled to walk. She looked exhausted, but there was strength in her posture. Whoever had left her there had underestimated her. The riders approached quickly, weapons visible at their sides. The cowboy guided her away from the tracks toward his horse. "You trust me?" he asked quietly. She hesitated only a moment. "Yes." He nodded once and helped her onto the horse before climbing behind her. As they rode away from the stopped train, the wind carried the sound of angry voices from the approaching men. The woman turned slightly. "They won't stop," she said. "I know," he replied calmly. The desert opened before them, wide and endless. Somewhere far beyond the hills waited his hidden ranch, a place few people knew existed. Behind them, trouble followed. Ahead of them, something new was beginning. And neither of them yet understood how deeply their lives were about to change. The horse ran across the open desert, its hooves striking the earth with steady rhythm as dust rose behind them. The cowboy guided it carefully, choosing narrow paths between rocky hills to avoid being followed easily. Behind them, the distant sound of riders slowly faded, but he knew they would not give up quickly. The young woman held onto the saddle tightly, her body still weak from exhaustion. She did not complain, but the way she leaned slightly against him showed how tired she was. The wind moved through her hair as she looked back once more, checking if anyone was still chasing them. "Are they still there?" he asked calmly. "I can't see them now," she replied softly, though worry still remained in her voice. He nodded and continued riding. The desert stretched endlessly, filled with silence broken only by the sound of wind and hooves. After a long time, rocky cliffs appeared ahead, forming a natural barrier that hid a small valley between the hills. The cowboy slowed the horse as they entered a narrow passage. Tall stones blocked most of the view from outside, making it difficult for strangers to notice anything hidden inside. When they reached the center of the valley, a small ranch appeared, simple wooden buildings, a water well, and a stable standing quietly under the sunlight. "This is where you live?" she asked. "Yes," he said. The ranch looked peaceful, far away from the chaos of towns and railroads. He helped her down gently, noticing how her legs trembled when they touched the ground. Without asking questions, he guided her inside the main cabin. The room smelled of wood and coffee. A small fire burned slowly in the corner, giving warmth to the quiet space. He gave her water first, then prepared simple food. She watched him carefully, studying his movements as if trying to understand who he truly was. "You stopped a train," she said after a long silence. He paused but did not look at her. "I just slowed it," he replied. "That was not normal," she said softly. He sighed and sat across from her. "Many things in this world are not normal," he said. She seemed to accept that answer for now. As evening arrived, the sky turned orange and purple. The desert felt calmer here, protected by the surrounding hills. For the first time since he found her, the woman allowed herself to relax slightly. "My name is Lyra," she said quietly. He nodded once. "You can call me Cade." She smiled faintly, as if relieved to finally share names. The silence between them felt less heavy now. Later that night, strange lights appeared in the sky. They moved slowly, almost like distant stars shifting position. Lyra stepped outside quickly, watching them with intense focus. "You see that?" she asked. "Yes," Cade replied. "That's not natural," she said. He watched the lights carefully. Something about them felt familiar, like a memory just out of reach. Inside the cabin, she finally began to speak about what had happened before he found her. She explained that she had arrived in the region searching for something hidden beneath the desert, something connected to the railroad. The company running the trains was not just transporting goods. They were searching for energy buried deep underground. This energy was powerful and dangerous. "They think they can control it," she said, "but they don't understand it." Cade listened quietly. "They called me a traitor because I tried to stop them," she continued. "I warned people that the experiments would hurt the land and the towns. Instead of listening, they decided to silence me." He felt anger rise again, but kept his voice calm. "That sign around your neck," he said. "What did it say?" She looked down. "It said I betrayed the frontier," she answered softly. Cade shook his head slightly. "People believe what they're told," he said. "Yes," she replied, "especially when fear is involved." The fire crackled softly between them. After a moment, she looked at him again. "And you?" she asked. "Where did your strength come from?" He hesitated. Years ago, he had been near a railroad explosion deep in the desert. Strange energy had flooded the area, changing things in ways he did not understand. After that day, he discovered abilities that frightened him. Instead of seeking answers, he chose isolation. "I don't know exactly," he said honestly, "but I think it's connected to what you're talking about." Lyra nodded slowly, as if confirming something she already suspected. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying sand across the valley. The peaceful moment did not last long. A sudden noise echoed from the cliffs, the sound of horses approaching. Cade stood immediately and moved toward the window. Shadows moved along the rocks outside. "They found us," he said quietly. Lyra's expression hardened, fear replaced by determination. "What do we do?" she asked. "We leave," he replied. He gathered supplies quickly while she helped as much as she could. The bond between them grew stronger through action rather than words. She trusted his leadership, and he respected her courage. Before they left, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small device glowing faintly with blue light. "This can expose the truth," she said. "If we reach the old station in the north, I can send a signal to every nearby settlement." Cade nodded. "Then that's where we go." Outside, voices echoed closer. The riders were searching carefully, expecting resistance. Cade helped her onto the horse again. As they prepared to leave, one of the riders spotted them and shouted. Gunfire echoed through the valley, but Cade guided the horse swiftly through a hidden path between rocks. They escaped into the darkness once more, riding toward uncertainty. Behind them, enemies followed. Ahead of them, the truth waited. And with every mile, Cade felt something changing inside him, a growing acceptance that his strange abilities might not be a curse after all. The night was darker than usual as Cade and Lyra rode north. The moon hid behind thick clouds, and the wind moved fast across the open desert. Sand brushed against their faces, and the sound of distant thunder rolled far away. But it was not real thunder. It was the ground. Every few seconds, the earth beneath the horse trembled lightly. The same strange vibration Cade had felt before stopping the train now returned, stronger than ever. Lyra felt it too. "It's waking up," she said quietly. Cade looked at her. "What is?" he asked. "The energy beneath the railroad." They continued riding until the old station appeared ahead, broken walls, shattered windows, and rusted metal beams standing like silent skeletons against the sky. It had been abandoned years ago after a mysterious accident. Most people believed it was haunted. Cade slowed the horse as they entered carefully. "This place," he said, looking around, "I was here once." Lyra turned toward him. "When?" "Years ago," he answered. "The day everything changed." He stepped down from the horse slowly. The air felt heavy, almost electric. Small sparks flickered between pieces of metal near the broken tracks. Lyra opened her small, glowing device. The blue light grew brighter as they moved deeper inside the station. "It's close," she whispered. They walked toward a cracked platform where the rails disappeared into a dark tunnel. The tunnel had been sealed long ago, but faint light now leaked through the cracks. Cade's chest tightened. "This is where the explosion happened," he said. He remembered the blast clearly. He had been passing through when the railroad company tested something underground. The explosion had thrown him backward. He should have died, but instead he woke up different, stronger, faster, connected to something unseen. Lyra placed her hand against the sealed tunnel wall. The blue device in her other hand reacted instantly, glowing brighter and making a soft, humming sound. "They built a reactor down there," she said. "It pulls energy from something not meant for this world." Cade looked confused. "Not meant for this world?" he asked. She nodded. "Years ago, a small object fell from the sky into the desert. The railroad company found it first. It was not metal like ours. It carried living energy." Cade felt a chill. "And they tried to use it," he said. "Yes." Suddenly, the ground shook violently. A loud crack echoed through the station as the sealed tunnel wall split open slightly. Blue light burst through the opening, shining into the night sky like a signal. At the same time, riders surrounded the station. Lanterns appeared in the darkness. Voices shouted. Cade turned. The railroad enforcer stepped forward from the shadows. His face was calm but cold. "You should have stayed out of this," the enforcer said. Lyra stood tall beside Cade. "You are risking everyone's lives," she said firmly. The enforcer laughed lightly. "Progress always has risk." Behind him stood armed men, unsure but loyal. Cade stepped forward slowly. Let her send the signal, he said calmly. End this. The enforcer shook his head. No one will believe her, he replied, but they will believe what they see. He raised his hand. The tunnel wall exploded open. A beam of blue energy shot into the sky. The ground trembled harder. Wind rushed in all directions as if the desert itself was breathing. From inside the tunnel, a glowing structure became visible, not fully machine, not fully natural. It pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. The men around them stepped back in fear. Lyra activated her device. It's unstable, she shouted. If it breaks completely, it will release everything at once. The enforcer's calm expression began to fade. You said you had control, one of his men said nervously. We do, the enforcer replied quickly, but his voice carried doubt now. Cade felt the energy pulling at him. It felt familiar, warm and powerful, but also wild. Lyra looked at him urgently. It changed you, she said. You survived because your body adapted. You can connect to it. He shook his head slightly. I don't know how. You stopped a train, she said firmly. You already control part of it. The reactor pulsed faster. Cracks formed along its surface. The sky above turned bright blue as clouds spun in a circle. Panic spread among the riders. Some began backing away. Others dropped their weapons. The enforcer shouted for control, but fear had already broken his authority. Cade stepped toward the glowing structure. Every step felt heavier, as if walking through deep water. The energy surrounded him, wrapping around his body like invisible fire. Lyra's voice reached him through the noise. Focus, she shouted. Don't fight it, guide it. He closed his eyes. For the first time, he did not fear the power inside him. He reached forward and placed his hands near the glowing core. The energy surged into him, bright, intense, overwhelming. His coat moved wildly in the wind as light surrounded him. Instead of pushing against it, he breathed slowly. The pulsing slowed. The cracks stopped spreading. The violent shaking softened. The beam of light shooting into the sky began to fade. Slowly, carefully, he redirected the energy downward, calming it instead of resisting it. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the reactor dimmed to a steady glow. Silence returned. The wind slowed. The sky cleared. Cade opened his eyes slowly. The bright light faded from around him. The riders stared in shock. The enforcer stepped back, speechless. Lyra walked toward Cade carefully. You did it, she said softly. He looked at his hands. For the first time, they felt steady. The men who followed the enforcer began turning away. You lied to us, one said angrily. You said it was safe. The enforcer tried to speak, but no one listened anymore. Fear had turned into understanding. The truth was visible now. Lyra raised her device high. Now, she said. She pressed the final command. A wave of blue light moved outward across the desert, not destructive but clear, like a signal spreading across towns and settlements. It carried proof of the reactor, proof of the danger, proof of the lies. Miles away, people would see it in the sky. They would ask questions. And the railroad would not be able to hide anymore. Cade looked at Lyra. This isn't over, he said quietly. No, she replied, but now people know. Behind them, the old station stood silent once more. The reactor remained stable for now, but its future was uncertain. The enforcer walked away slowly, his control broken. As dawn began to rise in the east, soft light touched the desert once again. Cade realized something important. For years, he had hidden from his own strength, but tonight he had used it not to destroy, but to protect. And standing beside Lyra, he no longer felt alone. The first light of morning slowly spread across the desert. Soft gold sunlight touched the broken station, the silent tracks, and the calm faces of the people standing there. The storm of energy was gone. The sky was clear again. Cade stood near the edge of the platform, looking toward the horizon. The desert felt different now, lighter, quieter, as if it had been holding its breath for years and finally exhaled. Behind him, the railroad enforcer stood alone. His men had stepped away from him during the night. Some had left completely. Others stayed, confused and ashamed. Lyra walked toward the group slowly. You all saw what happened, she said in a steady voice. The reactor was unstable. It could have destroyed nearby towns. You were never told the full truth. The men looked at each other. Fear had changed into understanding. One of them spoke carefully. We were told it would bring power and growth. Lyra nodded. Power without wisdom destroys, she replied. The enforcer finally stepped forward. You think people will forgive this? He asked bitterly. Cade turned toward him calmly. That depends on what you do next, Cade said. The enforcer looked around at the damaged station, at the sealed tunnel where the reactor now rested quietly. "What choice do I have?" he asked quietly. "For once," Lyra answered, "you can choose honesty." Silence followed. The desert wind moved gently across the tracks. Far away, a small group of riders approached from the south. They were not armed like hunters. They were town leaders and workers who had seen the blue signal in the sky. The news had spread faster than anyone expected. By midday, several people had gathered at the station. Cade remained quiet, standing beside Lyra as she explained everything clearly: the fallen object from the sky, the reactor built beneath the tracks, the unstable energy, and the lies that had hidden the danger. Some people were angry, others were shocked. But most were simply relieved that the disaster had been stopped. The railroad company would be investigated. The reactor would be carefully studied by people who understood the risks. The tracks would remain closed until everything was safe. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Lyra stood watching the desert hills. "It's strange," she said softly. "I spent so long trying to stop them, I almost gave up." Cade looked at her. "You didn't," he said. She smiled faintly. "No," she agreed, "because you stopped that train." He gave a small, quiet smile. Later that afternoon, Cade returned with her to his hidden ranch. The valley felt peaceful again. Sunlight touched the wooden cabin and birds circled above the water well. Lyra stepped down from the horse and looked around. "You built all this alone?" she asked. "Yes," he replied. She walked slowly across the yard. "You don't have to be alone anymore," she said gently. He did not answer immediately. For years, he had believed isolation was protection for himself and for others. But the events of the past days had changed something inside him. He no longer felt like a danger. He felt like a guardian. That evening they sat outside as the sun set behind the hills. The sky turned deep orange, then purple, then dark blue. "What will you do now?" he asked her. Lyra looked at the horizon thoughtfully. "The settlements need help rebuilding trust," she said. "The reactor must be watched carefully, and the truth must continue to spread." She paused. "But I don't have to do it alone." He looked at her quietly. "You asking me to join you?" he asked. She smiled softly. "I'm asking if you want to." The desert wind moved between them, gentle and calm. Cade thought about the explosion years ago, the confusion, the fear, the long years of hiding. Then he thought about the train, the moment he chose to step forward instead of turning away. "I spent years running from what I am," he said slowly. "Maybe it's time to run toward something instead." Lyra's eyes brightened. "I think the desert could use someone like you," she said. He stood up and looked across the open land. In the distance, workers had already begun repairing sections of the railroad. But this time, there were engineers studying the sealed reactor carefully. Guards stood nearby, not to hide it, but to protect people from it. A few days later, a small train moved slowly along the repaired track. It was not rushing like before. It carried supplies for towns that had struggled during the shutdown. Cade and Lyra stood on a ridge watching it pass. The engine whistle echoed softly across the plains. This time it was not a sound of fear, it was a sound of hope. Lyra turned toward him. "Do you ever wonder why you survived that explosion?" she asked. "Yes," he admitted. "I think the energy didn't change you by accident," she said. "Maybe it chose someone who would protect others." He looked down at his hands. "They're just hands," he said quietly. She shook her head gently. "They stopped a train," she reminded him. He laughed softly. "That was a long day," he said. They stood side by side as the train disappeared into the distance. The future was uncertain. The energy beneath the desert still existed. Other challenges would come. There would be new dangers, new tests. But Cade was no longer afraid of what he carried inside. And Lyra was no longer alone in her mission. As night slowly fell, stars appeared one by one in the sky. The strange lights that once moved unnaturally were gone. Only natural stars remained, shining peacefully. Cade turned toward the cabin. "Tomorrow," he said, "we start something new." Lyra nodded. "Yes," she replied. Together they walked back toward the ranch, leaving behind the tracks that had once been a place of fear. The desert wind carried their footsteps away. And somewhere deep beneath the earth, the energy rested quietly, no longer a weapon, but a responsibility. The cowboy who once stopped a train with his bare hands had found something greater than power. He had found purpose, and this time he would not face the horizon alone.